Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment of our monthly series Conversations with Bill. I'm Diego Mendes, a proud grad of the MSFA HFID program at Bentley. In this installment, we'll be talking to Bill about diversity in the program. What many of you may not know is that I have a Portuguese country accent because I'm from the countryside of Brazil, a very small town that's famous for coffee beans and bananas and farm animals and Brazilian country singers.
Mhm.
So, in any case, I have definitely been impacted by this uh, topic here at the program, and I'm excited to talk to Bill about this. Uh, this series is dedicated to capturing Bill's legacy before his retirement. Each month, a different HFID advisory board member will be speaking with Bill to discuss specific topics related to his journey and impact on the field of human factors and information design. Our goal is to create short, bite-sized content that provides deep insights and reflections from Bill. So, Bill, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, and thank you for the time for doing this.
Yeah, awesome. Let's get started. We'll start with the first question. The HFIT program has been recognized for its inclusive approach, welcoming students from diverse backgrounds in terms of gender, geographic location, race, abilities. Um, I'm curious as to what specific efforts were made early on in the program to ensure that diversity was a priority.
Yeah, and I always like to begin this by just sharing kind of an early story. I've been in the tech industry from the early days in the 80s. And I can always remember as a working professional in the field, sitting in conference rooms with a bunch of people that looked like me. And we'd sit around the table and we thought we were doing a great and kind thing when we would talk about, for literally it probably was more than a decade about we need to think about other people. And and again it began with we need to think about women and women as users, and then it began to broaden off and into other groups as well. And it was always framed as thinking. And I'm going like, eventually it kind of sunk in, and this is in the early days of the certificate program. But we need to stop thinking about them and start including them. And this is, and you and I communicated about this earlier. This is a job undone. If I have a disappointment, I think you framed it that we've been recognized and successful. I don't think nearly successful enough. This has been a source of frustration for me in a lot of different ways over more than 30 years. Not just within the university setting, but I think within the high tech industry, more generally. Again, many populations are underrepresented, and we're still just thinking about users that are diverse, where we wouldn't have to think about them nearly as much if our worker population of engineers and designers and researchers and product managers looked more like the general population, that were representative of the general population. So I think there's challenges and obstacles, on all levels. But I think I took that, and early on, I probably fell into that trap saying like, oh, this is good that we're thinking about other people, because that's,
Right.
and we didn't, we weren't calling it user experience at the time. It was human-centered design, and humans come in every shape and color, and we need to be more inclusive. We need to be more inclusive, but we need to stop thinking about them and including them in samples. Again, when we're doing research, and again, I'm not sure we have always succeeded there.
Mhm.
I don't think we deliberately try to diversify the samples that we're looking for. Both domestically diverse and internationally diverse as well, and we can explore that more fully. But thinking about that, and maybe I'm not sure how broad you want to frame this notion of diversity, but I always talk about inclusivity as well. With that, hand in hand, it's thinking about like not neurodiverse, neurodivergent populations as well. That
Yeah.
we talk about it a lot. we talk about it a lot, but you think about how many times have you deliberately gone out and tried to recruit a neurodiverse population for a research study? And
Right.
I think if we asked a lot of researchers that, they would fumble. They wouldn't know how to respond to that. They wouldn't even know how to go about doing it. They wouldn't know how to manage them in the research session. So that's where it all began, is just thinking about that, the state of the industry, and then how can we make changes in the program. And I'll just maybe talk about the early stage of making some progress. And I think where we were very successful in the early days of the program, the field was 70% men and 30% women. And I'm very proud to say, 30 plus years later, it's flipped,
Yeah.
where the program right now is 70% women and 30%, men.
Hmm.
And that was a very deliberate effort. That was a very, very deliberate effort of not just, I think in the early days, we recruited people out of the technical fields. And again, the technical side of the tech industry is going to be largely male.
Yeah.
And at that time in particular, it was going to be white males. And so we very deliberately started looking off into the social sciences and other areas where people had the right academic backgrounds, that would make them world-class researchers and even designers as well, looking into design fields as well. So recruiting in that sense, and making that gender shift, I think, was our first success, and I think it's been part of our legacy. I think it really has. The other thing very early on, and again, it was a real challenge, is that we recognized, again, our faculty looked like me. And you're not going to recruit a diverse population if everybody looks like me. And Mina has been part of the curriculum from very, very early on, but we needed to make a lot more progress there, and I think we have a much more balanced faculty as well, and I think that's critical. That's one of the things that we heard when we talked to prospective students, when they, particularly people of color. As I say, we look at not just the student population, but we look at the faculty population as well.
Hmm.
And the faculty population needs to, again, reflect the larger community. And I think we've made some progress in that area, maybe a lot of progress in that area. The job is never done. And I think we always need to be clear on that. I think when we say the job is done, then we're in trouble.
Yep. Yep. Thank you, Bill. I will follow that up with a question about students, right?
Mm,
So we talked a little bit about the industry and the program, but we also have students who have come in
mm.
who, came from different cultural, linguistic backgrounds, international students, different abilities. So I'm curious as to how those students have impacted the program.
I think they've impacted it greatly. And we always. I don't want you to think that we have, a magic formula or anything like that. I would never want to leave anyone with that impression, but always trying to achieve balance between, international students, domestic diversity, gender diversity, even broadening it out, even though you're not, deliberately recruiting and you don't always know, but, even hoping that we created a welcoming environment for the LGBTQ community as well within the program, and including that, in the diversity, group, is to create, a balanced environment and a welcoming environment where people felt safe, included, and heard. Again, I'd like to think that we strive to do that. Even today, before I, turned over the program, when a student would come in from a particular country, excuse me, whether it be, India, or whether it be from Taiwan, I would connect them to alumni. I would connect them from active students. Like, I connected a small community of students from Vietnam together this spring. That helps. That helps. It's very intimidating. And boy, I'll tell you, I give my international students all the credit in the world, that many of them are just picking up and landing here in Boston. They don't have a place to live. they know the language, but they've never had to, use it in such a conversational and day-to-day way. And not only do they survive, but they thrive. They have my total and complete respect for, being able to overcome that. But then I think we need to make sure that they feel welcome and they feel safe. Again, that you're reaching out to them and then you're not waiting for them to come to you. Because again, culturally, and again, now we're talking almost exclusively internationally, but culturally that, some people won't reach out. And
Right.
so you have to make the first move. But all of that, again, trying to build that community. And again, from year to year, the balance will get shifted, and that's perfectly fine, as long as you're always self-correcting along the way. But it greatly enriches the program. This is a program about user experience. This is not a program about Western user experience. So again, they bring a richness and they bring a real the kind of total reality of the human experience to the program. I say this about all of our students, but I learned so much from our students. Every day I step into the classroom, I'm learning something new. I think it's going to be the thing that
Yeah.
terrifies me and I'm going to miss the most about retirement. But I think, again, hearing other people's worldview, life experiences, you might even remember when I interview, the last question I always ask people is, what are you going to bring to the program? I interview every candidate that came in and I said, what are you going to bring to the program that's going to enrich the learning experience for everybody, including myself? And I'm very clear that I don't want to hear about professional work experience. I don't want to hear about what wonderful university you went to as an undergraduate. I want to know about you as a person, your life experiences, and I literally say life experiences and worldview, because I think that's what just creates an eye-opening experience for everybody. Again, user experience, the way it's taught, the way it's presented in most of our books, is from a Western perspective.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Most of my psychology books are from a Western perspective. And so a lot of that theory is built on a small subset of the human population. So to have people come in with that lived experience and sharing it openly and freely in the classroom, it, again, just makes it a better experience for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will add that as a student coming into the program, uh, I think I didn't realize how diverse the group was because you're taking classes with people who are,
Mm,
older than you, younger than you, different genders, different, cultural backgrounds, and so on. And a lot of my learning were happened, in becoming friends with them,
mm,
right? As we started, projects in the usability center, as we started projects for research, or as we're designing together for Chauncey's class, those were the moments where like we're sitting together around a problem, discussing it, and people come in with a different point of view, and
yeah,
we're like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Right. And then also outside of the classroom, right? When we're hanging out and having fun and helping each other with our resumes and our portfolios. Like I learned so much from students who were very different than me, and I
yeah.
am really truly thankful for that. So,
Yeah,
um,
and again, it's human nature for most people. Again, we're most comfortable around the people who are like us. And
right.
and and it's uncomfortable, and sometimes to be in that diverse population. But I think we should embrace that discomfort. It's always going to be a better learning experience on the other side. In January, I'm going to be taking a group of students to Japan for a global study tour. And I said, we're going to be students in this together. I always, talk about this when I teach the World Ready product design class. This is the one class where I'm not a professor. I'm a student with you, because you can never be, an expert in culture. We're going to experience this together, and it's the same thing when we go to Japan. Is again, it's just going to be an eye-opening experience. Your world, for most students, and even for myself, having been there, several times, going to turn my world upside down. And for a user experience professional, it's absolutely critical that we do this. We become very comfortable in the little world that we live in. whether it
Yeah,
be Apple, whether it be Bentley, it's great to be there. But to have your world every once in a while just shaken up, that's a good thing. It
yeah.
again, it just opens our eyes and it'll make us better researchers and designers. And just
That's
better
yeah,
human beings as well. We can never lose sight of that.
that's absolutely true. Um, One more question about the program for you. How does the program kind of assess whether they're doing well or not well in increasing diversity or increasing inclusivity over the years?
Yeah, so some things are easier to measure because they're visible. You can see. Sometimes the data doesn't reveal certain things. I don't think Bentley, and I don't think the academic world necessarily has always been good at collecting the data. And I think now in the climate that we're in right now, after the recent Supreme Court ruling, it's going to get even harder.
Yeah,
Again, we're still going to strive to do what we're talking about, and nobody's going to stop that. So that's just not going to happen. But again, I think the data and how you're going to measure that is going to become increasingly challenged. But what we do is, we are very much mindful of it. We're looking at the profile of the class. As I said, we always want to maintain, not favoring, not pushing some people aside, being fair to all, but trying to strike a good balance in that program for the reasons that we've been talking about. And so every year we look at this, at the beginning of the cycle, we say, okay, where will we come up short? We know there's certain populations we've struggled with, and the reasons are many and deep, and we're not giving up. And again, that we can see, and we continue to try to figure out. We're going to have more visits with grad admissions to historically Black colleges and universities in terms of recruiting.
mhm,
We're not just going to go to the engineering departments in those schools, but are we going to go to the psychology departments and the design departments and so on and so forth? So again, there's strategy. There's recruiting strategy. But again, we look to see where we've come up short in our recruiting efforts despite our best efforts. And this is why I said it. This is a job undone. This is a job where I haven't been satisfied with the progress. I think you were
mhm.
very kind in your introduction, but I haven't been satisfied with the progress. I think there's room for a lot more. There's growth in this particular area, and again, how do you set up a strategy? Then you look at the class that came in. Where were you successful? Why? I think communicating with those students, and those students are very, very, kind and generous and openly sharing, their experiences and letting us know when we come up short. Again, it's not enough to recruit a diverse population if you're not going to support them while they're here.
Yeah,
And, we along with a lot of other universities, we're not alone here, so I'm not beating up on Bentley. I think for years, we strive to, diversify the population, but then not provide the appropriate support systems. And it's not just financial. It's a lot of other, kinds of support programs, learning programs, things like that. You just can't throw them in and leave them on their own.
yeah,
And this is for all students, but I think for some of these populations in particular. So I think we need to build that infrastructure. Bentley's been a lot better at doing that in recent years, but it took a while to get there.
yeah. Thank you. Um, I have one more question for you. Well, two actually, but one that I wanted to follow up with, which is, in the current climate, my impression is that a lot of the efforts around increasing diversity will become more informal, if you will, right? It'll depend on folks who are out in the industry and so on, and alumni, right? And I'm curious as to how you view the role of us as alumni, of us as industry professionals. How is it that we can, foster inclusivity and diversity going forward?
Yeah, and you're right. I think it's will have to be informal, and it will have to be the larger community. We were working really hard, I would say, over the last decade to establish partnerships, and I think we had some solid partnerships with the tech world and the corporate world. That's going to be tough now moving forward. That's going to be really really tough with the pushback against the DEI kinds of initiatives and what's going on in the political climate today. But again, that won't stop us as a community. So both on the recruiting side in terms of helping us identify and both identifying, but also where we have an applicant come in that we can connect us. So I think it's going to be a two-way street. I think again where you might be identifying, talking to people, pushing them our way. We'll be identifying people and then saying, okay, we know it's important for the things that we talked about before, that they know it's a welcoming community and a supportive community. For other people, it's one thing for me to say it, but to hear that firsthand from an alumnus, I think is absolutely critical. I think it's also important as well, when you recruit from certain schools, like, again, when we recruit from the historically Black colleges and universities, a lot of times we're getting younger people who have less industry experience. So then they're very disadvantaged coming into the program because, as you know, most people coming into the program have, 4 or 5 years of tech experience. So how do we set up kind of like pre-programs where, and I this is where I'm disappointed, that I wasn't able to pull this off before retirement. But I had discussions with a number of tech companies and financial services groups where we would say, okay, the summer before these folks come into the program, can you fund a summer internship program? So those
Mhm.
kinds of pre-programs as well, the kind of level the playing field, I think are going to be important. So again, the degree to which alumni can do that in terms of setting up, and not a traditional internship. This is not a traditional internship. This is building that experience that they don't have. And it's the same thing, when I go in and visit, high schools in Boston, in really urban areas. They don't have the role models, that, a lot of us benefited from, in terms of, parents working in the tech industry, parents working in academia, and so on and so forth. They can't even imagine, that they could be a game designer, or a software engineer or a software designer. So again, even I think, and again, I think we see this in the STEM fields. I was on the Mass High Tech Council for years. And again, one of the things that we were trying to do is bring, more women and people of color into the STEM fields, and starting really early, like in, basically in grade school and middle school and high school, and kind of nurturing people. It needs to start earlier. I think again we can sit here and say like, oh, the alumni are going to help us recruit. Yeah, but if you don't have a population of people out there ready to be recruited, so I think we have to look at this as a long game. It really is a long game where we go out as a community. We go into, and our students have done this. We've gone into the schools in Boston.
Yeah.
And we've talked to these kids. I've participated in high school programs where they come to the Bentley campus, and again is starting sooner and earlier. And even then, and this is kind of the thing that sort of depresses me, and you can't give up. But we as a Mass High Tech Council, we realized we could do this. We can walk people through this experience, for 10 years and get them through, university, and then they go on into the work world that's not welcoming,
Yeah.
and isn't diverse. So, and then they drop out. So we can be successful over this educational experience, but if we move them into a workplace where they don't have support. So I think even, building, communities, and again, I think some people push back against that, but I think, this kind of support network, where, you help people. And again, I think some of the changes that are being made, and Janelle's pushing forward now, in reviving our, virtual community, is where we can create these little subgroups where we can support one another, not just, before you come into the program, while you're in the program, but after the program, and do a career long. I think, again, that kind of holistic, comprehensive view is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and you're starting to touch on my last question, which is kind of what your vision for diversity and inclusion for the program is going forward.
Yeah, I think, we've been very successful. I think we've been very successful on diversifying internationally. I think we've been very successful diversifying, um, on gender, on the male female kind of balance in the program. I think women of color, we've been fairly successful. I would say when you're looking at just the numbers and then the success as they move into the industry, where we have not been as successful as men of color. And I would say looking really long and hard and not just looking, but listening and figuring
Mhm.
out why. What are the barriers there? That we have not been able to move the needle. And
Yeah,
and I'm embarrassed. I mean, I can look back over 25 years and I can count. That's not good. And
yeah.
that's despite all of our best efforts that we've been talking about. So what's happening there? Why is that? And
Mhm.
I think it's a big complicated issue, but I think that's the one area where we need to make inroads. Again, we can't say we're diverse as an industry, we're diverse as a program unless we're truly diverse across the board. And so if you have that one kind of gaping, hole, it's got to be fixed and you got to figure it out. And you're
Yeah,
not going to do it. You're not going to do it alone. It's not something that, the faculty are going to do, the institution is going to do. I think we have to, talk to people, meet with people, figure out what's going on in the industry and again, keep experimenting and exploring ways of moving forward.
yeah, yeah. That's right. Still a lot of work for us to do.
Yeah, it's not done, and I worry, again, not to get political, but in the climate that we're in right now, it's going to get tougher. And so, to end on a positive note, I mean, the strength of Bentley has always been the community. We could not have done what we've done over the last 25 years if it hasn't been for the, incredible group of students and loyal alumni. The fact that you're here in your morning right now when you have a busy day ahead of you, doing this, and the participation level of the alumni in this program, we're in a better position than most any other institution to continue to make progress regardless of the political climate. I think we're all motivated to do this, and again, in this field, it's a field that's about people. And it's
Yeah,
a field that's about all people. So I think we're all motivated to achieve that, outcome.
yeah. Well, Bill, I think we're coming to our closing minutes here. I wanted to thank you for sharing all of that with us. I also wanted to thank you for the work that you and the rest of the faculty and admissions officers have put into the program to create that environment. As a person coming from a very different background than most of the folks in the program, I benefited from that safety net that you all worked hard to build. Uh, and I mean, there's so many stories I could share about how the program broadened my perspectives in my mind, and my perception of design, user experience,
Mhm.
and creating products for people. Uh, so I'm deeply appreciative of that, and not to discount all the work that we still need to do,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But we
Yep.
we can certainly celebrate where we got to, and I deeply appreciate all that you've done and all of the rest of the faculty and folks at Bentley have done, and especially the alumni who I got
Yep.
to learn from, study with, and still get inspired by every day. So
Well, thank you very much, Diego. It's been been a joy, chatting with you.
yeah, thank you, Bill.
All
All
right.
right,
Bye bye.
we'll, yeah, we'll see you in the next one.